Hello again. In this session, we will have Gökhan Kılıcı and Efe Küçük. They are going to make a panel together. Cappuccino LLC CEO, is going to talk about the things that we have to be careful. And Efe Küçük, Game Factory CEO, is going to talk about better communication. And as well, we'll give hints about the publishing business. Now I'll give the floor to them. Hello. Hello, Gökhan. Welcome. Welcome, Efe. How are you? Great, thank you. When you are ready, you can just start. We are ready. First of all, thank you very much for your invitation to this event. It is a great event. Game developers are not always in everywhere. They are mostly on the production side, but on the hyper casual side, they just are more active recently, and Turkey becomes actually an active market, and it somehow balances with the publishers, because publishing a game is a totally different business. So we are generally on the code or idea side of this business. However, when it comes to publishing, while UA or monetization, meditation, these are all other actually things that require different know-hows, and for one person to do everything is not really possible. So that's why developers are somehow in need of publishers. And in the end, of course, some problems might occur. Publishers, when the project starts, might face with some problems because both parties speak a different language. So that's why when it comes to publishers, we're not really obliged to do whatever the publisher says. So I think that we really need to get a good lesson out of it, because when the both parties speak the same language, great success can come out of it. But if not, actually a big failure also might happen. So today, together with Efe, we will talk about the tips, and as well we'll give recommendations to the ones who would like to start working with publishers. Let me talk about maybe new studios. Gökhan. There are new actually studios who produce games, and what I observe mostly for them is out of hyper casual, they are generally willing to produce a game, and they just are keen on more complex games. And the studios who would like to actually create a hyper type of games, they also look for opportunities and better. One thing is about a hyper casual games. It might look basic. Technically, it might be basic. However, it is actually quite challenging and difficult internally. So I believe that this is something also I observe. Hyper casual games for the new starting teams is a really great opportunity, because you learn how to conduct a game, and as well you meet with new techniques, and you work in different games every week. You test many games, you lose and you win, and you learn how to lose and win, and you actually just create lessons out of the games, and without actually receiving an investment, you are looking for different opportunities. So generally, I advise new beginners to start with hyper casual. This is actually a really debated and discussed issue. You might have seen such debates in LinkedIn. Also, I'd like to make a comment about why to work with publishers, or why the studios work with publishers. Maybe we can make some comments on that. Gökhan, maybe you can make a comment on that because you're quite an experienced, right? Well, it is, of course, is all about money. Hyper casual, meet core, and the Steam and the console. Well, all these triple games are different than the hyper casual. So just think of a hyper casual game, a regular game. In such games, we have in a purchase actually a feature, and this is the main source of income. Well, generally, such games do not have much to do with the advertisements, but it is a return starts with B90. Which means that the returns might come 3 months after or 6 months after the game is launched. However, hyper casual is totally different than that. There is no net purchase, and the main income source in 95% is advertisements. So as there are ads, we do not actually wait for a long period, but on the third day or the fourth day, we start making money. So a casual game on the mobile side, publishing it yourself, well, it wouldn't really demand an extra work burden. You can just do it with a team of 3 or 4 people, because we have a curve, certain curve. You can make certain improvements, and as well you can look for answers of what to sell better. So the hyper casual, on the other hand, is like the crypto money stocks, right? There are instant changes. The coin value can actually rise from 4 cents to $4, and in the background you have to instantly follow it. It requires a professionalism and as well a crowded team. So we actually develop our own games. Well, I'm talking mostly about the startups and the freelancers. Well, a production team in one hand, and on the other hand, advertisement and monetization side, you have to actually establish a secondary team, and it is expensive. For the hyper casual, and profit margins are quite low, and you really need to have an investment in the beginning. Finding such a budget, such a fund, especially in these times, is not really that easy, because everyone is trying to get benefit of the hyper casual, especially on the side of the publishing. Well, it's quite difficult. And there's also lack of the technical knowledge. I totally agree with you. I am older, a publisher, or a former publisher I am. So I would say that there is a bidding fight and war, in the unseen part of the iceberg. So I think that finance is really important, because arbitrage is law, because we are talking about such a game. So it's not like 15 scream that we see in the studios. So you're trying to stabilize the stream, and then you're required to healthily actually publish it, and it's not that easy. So network and financial sources and the teams are all required, knowledge as well, know-how, and game pool. These are all the things that are required. Well, so that's why we are not in this business ourselves. Cappuccino, my company was casual based. Back then, there was not hyper casual. Yes, hyper casual requires long processes, and if you make one error, this project of even 1 year can turn into a trash. Hyper casual is good because you just spend maybe 1 week, and if it is a trash, it's just a trash. It doesn't matter. So the future of hyper casual, I don't know up until where it would go. I don't know, but probably it will go with its own flow. So yes, we are dependent on publishers, and publishers. They just do this business quite clean, by the way. When I first entered into the business, a dollar was actually valuing only 1 Turkish lira. we have a really great companies, by the way, publishing actually companies, but there is a great exchange rate difference in Turkey. And just let's think of Ukraine, Pakistan, India. Well, hyper casual publisher somehow becomes the actually low-cost production centers, all these countries. But in Turkey, economy is quite devaluated and depressed. So it actually marks Turkey a little bit different than the other centers and hubs such as Pakistan and India, for example. South America actually shows a similar economy with the Turkey, but you wouldn't see such examples or companies in America or in, for example, in Europe that much. There is not any hyper-casual firm in America, and the publishers know it very well. So when you are to look at in the site, you would see young people, 20 to 25 years old, and publishers try to get them. So young people, they would like to make games instead of working, full time. And the publishers get benefit of this, it is their business model, hiring such young talents by paying them, of course. We had a really bad scenarios, and I heard and observed really worst case scenarios, unfortunately. And it is Turkey, it's our own country, it's our nation. We want each brilliant brain to be in the country, within the country. It's really important to stand together, stand still against the publishers, I believe. Well, okay, let's continue to talk a little bit about the activities of publishers. When it comes to hyper casual, now there are a lot of types, which means that game tests. What do we do? In a nutshell, I can explain it maybe. Within the month, we test some games and we decide on the concepts together with the publisher, and we just try to drive a concept that is backed with the data, and all these ideas are tested. By the way, it is changing from one publisher to another publisher, and now there is a tendency towards the Android. So not only on the Android, but we also do the video testing. So a user, when it clicks on a game, it can go to the App Store or to the other platforms. CPR is another platform that we try to estimate on data. And if everything goes well, then we add it to the monetization, and we look at the LTV, and if everything is fine, generally we just update 5 to 6 times, and then we launch the game. Well, it's not that pink though, it's not, everything is not that rose and pink. So it might take a long time, or it might be a short period of time. It depends. However, as well, luck is just part of this business. So of course, as a data related business, you have to look at the correct place and follow the correct things. The game shall be fun and it should be marketable, and luck has to be with you. Because in the hyper casual industry, as much as you see on the stores, is just like a honey pot. It is how it looks. But how to get rid of the sharks if you are to swim in this pool? Well, I would say that we do not live in such a world. I have a great idea and I'll make this game and it will rocks. No, you have to work database. Otherwise, you will be just wasting your effort and your money. These sharks are very cynical approach to you. Well, by the way, I don't say that each publisher is a bad publisher. There's not even such a concept as such as the good publisher and a bad publisher. There are negative scenarios, and maybe no one is giving a feedback. and there can be maybe people who work beautifully with a publisher whose feedbacks are quite negative. So this sentence, maybe you have heard it a lot, right? Your games are beautiful, we would like to work with you. This is actually the most tricky sentence phrase that you can hear from a publisher. Generally, publishers tells you, just lend me companies monthly and I'll pay you commission. So generally their approach would be as such. Your game is great, we really love it. We can really work together great and would like to meet with you. But it is a lie, actually. You meet, you talk about your targets and objectives. And then there is an important thing, yes, sometimes many people or many companies get a prepayment, and some people get paid when it is launched, or some people receive it as an investment. And some other publishers just say that just only work with me, but work with no one else. And I'll pay you, or some other companies pay you based on the prototypes. So, there are different scenarios. Almost all publishers use one of these systems because otherwise, surviving in this arena wouldn't be that easy. So I think that the most problematic thing is contracts. Unfortunately, on the developer side, in our country, there is not a contract template which is valid. So that's why the contract is given by the publisher is something that you have to obey or confirm. Well, if you are a studio, a famous studio, a powerful one, then you can maybe change some articles in the contract. But from the indie perspective, the chance if you are changing articles is really low, and some really minimal articles and lines, even one line can really, unfortunately, put you a lot of problem. And many indies, they don't even work with lawyers, attorneys. You can work without problem for a month, and then the publisher maybe gives you an instruction, and then as well reminds you a few articles by making a reference to the contract. So it's really important to read correctly the hidden articles. You need to read the lines within the paragraph. You have to read the sub articles, and gay is just one of them. So that's why the smallest discussion with the studio cannot be shared with a third party, and you can be sued for that. While Turkish firms can be sued very quickly and easily. However, the vice versa is not that possible because it is expensive and it requires a lot of effort. You have to actually fight in another country, a foreign country. And generally our young indies, well, they say that, okay, that was a bad experience and let's forget about it. So that's why I would say contracts are really important. Well, for example, I've seen such templates of contracts. Launch the game with me. I'll take the game in my own account, but you cannot work with in another studio for 6 months or 8 months. So you have to only work for me. So publishers that like to hold as many studio as possible in hand, even the game is not really that effective. Keeping it at 15 CPI, for example, is what they're trying to do. And this is one of the biggest trap. Well, the studio actually, unfortunately, is damaged. They, after a while, these studios, they get sick. And they either leave the sector totally, or just run and escape to the hybrid site. So do not directly sign the contracts. Please consult it with an experienced lawyer. Analyze it in a detailed manner before you sign any contract. Well, I totally agree with you. We hear a lot, about it. There are a lot of studios get hurt, especially small studios. Please pay for the attorneys instead of, wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars afterwards. Just, pay for such a consultation service in the beginning before you sign a contract with a publisher is really, really important. Furthermore, let's talk about this relationship between the publisher and the studios. Work relationship. Yes, studio needs a publisher and publisher needs a studio. So as a studio, our approach, towards the publisher as a positive angle, I would make a comment. You can try many games, you can look at the chart and you can find maybe the ad accounts and look at them, or if you do have another method, you can follow the sector. However, the publisher, I think that plays an important role that we cannot ignore, because publishers test hundreds of games in a week, and they just create a data-driven business model. And for us to be successful, we have to make sure the publisher wants to be as successful as we are, at least. Just think of it, if you are a publisher and you are testing hundreds of games monthly, and it is limited for you to support them all, and the publisher might have an internal support maybe system, and maybe the publisher can categorize or classify studios, and it is very normal. We also have our own systems like tier 1 to 3 teams we have, and the support we provide is different than one another, and it has to be. And you should plan it together with the publisher and be aware of it in the beginning, and just should be aware of the fact that you need them. You might be thinking of a concept and you can maybe tell the publisher, I've tried it, and we tried a creative and the CCP is good. Should we try it? I think that it is healthy, and we can maybe try it, and you can also ask to maybe get benefit of the data of the publisher. Furthermore, your pipeline, it is really important to have it sound and clean and healthy. What's that pipeline? You might talk to a publisher and you might make a meeting on every Monday, and you plan your ideas, and on the planning phase, you maybe exchange visuals, and it's really important, to make these meetings in a way that you are comfortable with. It can be in every Monday weekly, or it can be in every 2 weeks. So a studio really should optimize and internal decide on this relationship, because on the hyper casual side, velocity is really important. You have to be open mind. You have to just keep track of your own production cycle, and you have to really keep a great track of your relationship with the studio, and for all the prototypes you have to make internal comments and even ask maybe a weekly tips from the publisher. I think that this is really, really important for the publishers. So how about your experience when you work with the publishers? Well, video test and working with a publisher, I think that it is important. It's good. And by the way, I have worked with a really great publishers. I just think, on in the site, yes, Hyper might be a basic game. I agree with this idea.
Of course, polish, smooth innovations. ACM, if you're doing an ACM game, for instance, or else the shaders, the perfect usage of shaders, step by step. I mean, only the stuff that professional companies can do, those quality work is what that counts for us. Well, on indies still, uh, in Turkey, uh, people insist on working with us. I mean, the CTR video testing is what I would like to touch upon now. Here, what we do is that a video, I mean, what's the percentage of its viewing and how many people have clicked on it and have been on that link. That is what we want to see, and we never are after cost per click and cost per install. Of course, a CPR measurement is more to do with the concept. Here, in this respect, the work you do, it may not be too like smooth, legendary, like polished up, but if you're able to sell the concept, especially, I mean, we get really good results from CTR and CTC, but what is important is for that game to be downloaded, and that polish and smooth system, what that is what that counts. Well, new graduates, even people who are not even graduates, 2, 3 friends come together and they have established a company called X Games, and they work with a publisher and the CTR results. I mean, this is a really brilliant idea, mobility data, idea data. The more ideas, I mean, within a publisher, it's impossible for them to come up with thousands of different ideas because these game jams in recent times, they wouldn't have come into our lives. They would have dealt it within themselves. But what I'm actually hooked upon is that there is the CTR, which gets really good results, for instance, and it's not a really unique idea. Anybody at any moment can do this. Yes, in the studio have come up with this idea, but for this agility, for instance, if when say that this idea has delivered poor results, let's not continue all the internal teams of each publisher and the tier one, at least 2, 3 studios they have that they are really experienced in this respect. This idea, like within 2 weeks, for instance, in that tier one studio, the rolling out of that idea has a high probability. Yes, there are things that we hear and see both in Turkey and abroad, but in this respect, our indies, how can they defend themselves? How can they protect themselves? In this respect, there are two things, especially contracts are important. First and foremost, in contracts, what is being undermined is the intellectual property rights, because it is really extensive, this concept. It's not only limited to the game idea. Okay, we've got the game idea, nobody else can execute this idea. If you just put that statement in a contract, then you would be undermining it. In terms of intellectual property rights, at least a CTR that I have come up with, or as a CPC result, for instance, if there should be an article in the contract that prevents other studios under in the same indie to execute that. If there is a really good money out there, sometimes we said, okay, I mean, probably they wouldn't do. I mean, we just leave it to the goodwill, the ishallahs and mashallahs of the counterpart. But I mean, we should definitely have that article. I mean, of course, we're not accusing anybody in advance, but 1 out of 3 studios can do that. Maybe they won't be doing that. Maybe they will have that concept function with a different iteration, but they already know the concept now. A good ECR is something that everybody falls in love with, and it is not easily grasped. That factor of chance that Efe has mentioned is also really important. If we were to get a really good result from each game, it would be fantastic. Then we would all be merry and live happily ever after, but we don't have such a world. So in this respect, those tier one studios, they will definitely share that idea with that tier one studios. And if you do not protect yourself with a contract, then you would just end up with your game being executed by other studio. And the publisher would say, okay, they also thought of the same game, for instance. I mean, this is a really brilliant lie, you know. They also have thought of the same idea. Big brains think alike, for instance, so they could say, and that would be the end. So contracts are important in this respect. Definitely, I agree. And in this respect, when selecting a publisher, including your first contract, uh, I think that you should definitely elaborate your expectation that you have on concerning that relation, and especially other studios that have worked with that publisher. You have to get their references, um, given an ear to their comments. You would have a general assumption about that publisher, and also healthy and transparent communication with the publisher is really important. When I speak with a publisher, for instance, the first thing that I touch upon is transparency. When I work with you, I say I want to be totally honest and transparent, which is the case. Whatever takes place, I pass it on to the publisher, but I vice versa expect the same from the publisher, because I say, if the contrary, I wouldn't be able to work properly, comfortably, because we as a studio publisher have to concentrate on good games that do good business, but we shouldn't like be concerned what's like whether they would go behind us and like breach the contract, or else we shouldn't go into that hustle, according to me. So in advance, from the very beginning, we should set certain criteria concerning our relation with the publisher and our communication with the publisher. Human communication is really important in the gaming industry. That is what I have underlined time and again on LinkedIn. So they treat us as like robots. I always in each event say that know your network, internalize them, and own them, because you know different studios. Knowing different studios is an advantage on your side, because you may ask those studios whether they have been able to work with that publisher again. And when working with that studio and publisher, if you know other studios as well, your value in the eyes of the publisher increases, actually, if you've got such a network of studios. It adds a leverage to you, and it also strengthens your situation when you're bargaining, and you're able to get different information, and you're updated concerning the sector, because hyper casual, just like in other sectors, it may seem like coming up roses, but no, it is not. Everything is not with pink glasses, Googles. So please evaluate that publisher very well before you get into contact. And the moment you start interacting with it, please state that you're transparent and that you expect the same in return, because the first 2 3 months and the upcoming months would be totally different from each other. And a final tip: bargaining and trade. The first rule is that the first comer is always 1-0 behind in the game. So if the publisher knocks on your door, then you would have the upper hand. Uh, so the publishers if they are trying to dominate you, if they are not listening to you, if they like do not treat you equally, if you're not on the same uh, bar, then that is a really good that is a really major threat. The publisher should not be the boss of the studio, and vice versa. Studio should not be the boss of the publisher. You're doing business, and it has to be mutual. And in terms of transparency, what I would like to say, that each publisher and studio, of course, they want to come up with a great hit. And yes, we've launched our hit, and we see our games on the top charts. We achieve really good success stories. Each publisher, or most publishers actually, the CPIs they're able to view, and art down ARP, LTV, how much has been invested, how much money has been made. And they shouldn't give the access to such a panel. Yes, there are publishers that are really transparent in that respect, and that is how you're able to view the money invested and money gained. And actually, you come up with question marks whether that is a panel that belongs to him, or else that does the mediation tool give access, because if that is a tool, then with a 0.25 multiplier, they could change the results. Of course, this is swindling, but do they care? No, they do not. Sometimes they do not give you a panel at the end of the month. They just deliver you an Excel table. This is how much money we've made, so they say to you, and you say, why is that low? And then they say CPI has increased. That is the dull answer. So if a publisher, people do not show you that transparency in the upcoming period, when you create your own success story, when you are about to make money, because the sales of that business is the same in all publishers. Let's find a perfect hit. We will invest billions of dollars, so they say. I mean, with those fancy words, they trick you in. But at the end of the day, if you see that $100,000 there, you would just wonder to yourself, if you don't have that transparency, and if they do not give you the access to that panel, actually, you have to be suspicious, because they do not care at all. Their only concern is to make money. First of all, they just want to make make a profit out of you with the prepayment that they have given to you, and then they want to make a profit out of each game. So the most important thing to pull through those challenges is to work with professional publishers, that they give access to their panels in a transparent manner. If there is no transparency, because whatever what we do will go in vain, that's for sure. Yes, I agree. And also the new starters, because they're amateur, they're inexperienced, they face certain problems. One of the most important problems is the emails that publishers send off to you. If I were to open up my old email box, I'm sure that we would see dozens of emails sent to publishers with no proper response. So you have to definitely be transparent in both sides. And so in this respect, just like Gökhan has mentioned, each game idea, if they had to become popular that easily, publishers wouldn't need those studios. They would do everything in their own internal studios, and they wouldn't work with external studios. But there is no such. I think they need us, but we need them, but they also need us. And so please do not be taken in by those fancy words. So first of all, good transparent communication is really important. It's not that, I mean, game name, also your name, and like 30 to 40 words of random, for instance, awesome, perfect. I mean, with an automated email, we have to spam here, there, and everywhere, because when you work as a publisher, you have to create this network. So before deciding on what publisher to work with, before signing a contract, please do not be taken in by those fancy words and numbers there, but just retrospectively see what they have been, how they have treated their other studios, and also frankly speak with your counterpart, explain whatever you crosses your mind, because that is what I underline, because later on you may, of course, be hurt and be troubled. Of course, you learn things throughout the journey, but what is important is that when you start, make a good fresh start without being damaged that much, and having the right studio, the right publisher, because this is what a business relation requires, and also publishers. Yes, I mean, normally we launch a product and we offer it to the publisher. Of course, the publishers has got much more of a data than we have, and the data that they have, they can make it compatible with our product, and they want to have a good CPI and retention quality. That is our very purpose. And in this respect, something more important, the publisher that you're going to work with, who's going to be your liaison person. For instance, all publishers, because they know the Turkish market, and in Turkey, for instance, they do not seek for publishing. They say that they seek publishing managers. They want only fluent English, but there is this great problem here. If you're only seeking for fluent English in a publisher with a publishing manager, why is that so? Because publishers, I mean, there is this publishing manager. If they are working with a publishing manager, I mean, if you're working with a publisher, you cannot work with another publisher if you are a manager to a publisher. So in this respect, when it comes to sales and studio, they seek for people who are mostly involved in sales, but publishers do not want to invest in that area that much, and that person who actually sells your games starts like making comments about your games. And I'm really good gamer. I compile really good data, And I've been in the sector for 8 years, but I have come across managers who are actually salesperson, and they give a feedback to my game. They cannot do that. If they receive data, if they have speaking based on data, uh, if and make their feedback accordingly, they are more than welcome. But most publisher managers say that, according to me, that is my idea. Please back up. I mean, back off, because there are thousands of other people who can do that. When before you start working with a publisher, what you have to ask is, who's going to be my publishing manager? I mean, from its LinkedIn, you would see its background, his background, her background, they see his previous work. Believe you me, if you've been working in a totally different sector, just forget about our publisher, because you would never ever be successful in cooperating together. FS companies, I mean, all publishers want to work with us, not only his company. This is valid for all of you. Maybe not all publishers across the world, but if a publisher has emailed you, you can show this to 4 or 5 different publishers, because there is this light about the work that you're doing, that indication there. And you should be asking who's going to be in contact with you from that publisher. And please be that person, be a person with a game design background who knows about the business. It's not that you manufacture your own product and test it. So there is no point in having a publisher if that's a poor metric game of yours. If they cannot turn it into a good metric one, then the publisher has a huge shortcoming in that respect. And that feedback is really important, but it has to be coming from a reliable person. $1 CPIs drops all of a sudden to 20 cent in, and 10 drops to increases to 30 retention, for instance. And there are study case explaining how this has all taken place. It's not like giving dull feedback. But this is really important, because the purpose here is to come up with a hit in the shortest period of time. And when launching that hit, yes, the publisher is going to help you banks. And it's not only to do with marketing money only. This final touches, the fine touches to your product, they are really important. Yes, I totally agree. And I would like to underline once again, the feedback, the iteration request have to be data-based, which is of great importance, because each game designer may have a different perception towards the game. The publishing manager, you name it, have a different perception towards your game, but data is the most reliable. They should be giving their feedback based on the data, but not their personal perception. By the way, I think that Sardar has come in, so we're going to be receiving questions. Yes, we are nearing our time, the end of our time. So if it is also suitable for you, let's switch to the Q&A. There is this anonymous question. Sometimes you feel timid and shy in asking questions to the publisher, and they do not let you intervene with the contract. And what about an IP? Can we also change the IP articles? Yes, I mean, you can change the contract, but they just say that this is our template. We cannot change. That is the lie. But if you say that, no, X publisher does it like that, you can say that. Yes, everybody, like, the sector is there are companies who are like agents to each other. Everybody knows each other's contract templates, even though it is forbidden. But explicitly, you can say that, no, I want this. It's really important for me to have this. And if, for instance, that is to do with the value of your company. If, for instance, there are 8 publishers after you, you can just say that, no, I am also in contact with the X publisher. So you can just stake all, and you can just pretend and like put on your poker face and say that, no, I've got other publishers cooperating with me and they want to work with me, but you should definitely consult your advocate. If there is a nonsense request coming from the publisher, at least your lawyer would actually for instance, could come up with a recommendation to put certain articles in that contract, which would make it all more reliable, of course, at the end of the day. There is this question from Osman Barış. What you explain is for hyper casual mobile, but for PC games, is it also valid? Is there a change in the process? Any ideas and experience in that respect which you deem important in sharing? Well, first and foremost, it's really important to say, I don't know. If you were to ask me this AAA games, how do they launch it? Or else I've done ideas and how can I develop it? How can I test it? How are they published? I don't know. I don't have such an experience but we do mobile mid-core compared to hyper casual. Uh, if I were to actually express my own ideas, right or wrong, it is much of a lengthier process. Hyper casual, I mean, I'm leaving casuals or as hardcore, midcore, I'm leaving them aside. They mostly depend on advertisements. They depend on advertisements for income, and they address totally different audiences. In that respect, they've got huge differences according to me to each other. And beyond all, a mobile game and a PC game, I do believe that financially speaking, their costs and the know-how required and their production operational process, the complexity of the games are totally different to each other. So looking at it, both actually, yes, I mean, they are under the roof of the game sector, but they have to be separated from each other because the monetization culture of one is different, the audience is different, the platform produced is totally different. The other one has got a totally different audience, has a more loyal audience, has got different like payment behaviors, for instance, habits. That is what we can say roughly. But in Turkey, how many AAA studios do we have? It wouldn't be more than the hands of a finger, excuse me, the fingers of a hand. Well, yes, more or less the process is the same, but actually I have uh, it's the same actually, just like a book and a Pegasus publisher and you authoring a book. It's the same. Well, NTV, I mean, you just advertise on a certain platform, and how much money have you made? You can just track it. However, on the PC side, the Steam side, or as the console side is totally different. There, it's based on influencers, blogs, and fanzines, and the advertisements. The more you widespread that advertisement across the world, the more the system functions. So, for instance, an X influencer or a fanzine, you pay all that money for advertisement or else a TV channel, it doesn't matter. Uh, nobody can see its return on investments. Yes, I mean, what is important is whether that money has been invested or not. I mean, the publisher could like make a mistake there and could invest in a long platform, for instance, a mobile platform. If the campaign is going poor, you would just end that platform and that would be it. You would put a full stop. But there, on the net metric base, I mean, you cannot follow with net metrics on the other side, the advertisement return on investment. You have to rely on the publisher in that respect, but the rest, more or less, they are the same. Well, actually, we are really limited in time. So one final question, please, you go and pick that question. I'll give this honor to you, Okan. We, for instance, had a cumbersome situation with a publisher, but because of some legal, of course, situation that we are in now, I cannot share it. Yes, exactly. If you're not a priority owner, you just stay in the background and become like a contractor. uh, Yes, exactly. Like if you were to say that I've got this system and I've got 6 different studios, no publisher would say that. You have to be aware of this. Yes, if you've got a really good, nice track record, I mean, beyond that, if you've got a really good portfolio game, then automatically you start alleviating your level situation in the minds of all publishers. So you can experience this, but you don't have much of a chance to inquire this. What is important here is a sound communication, close follow-up, a good sound contract. I mean, just show yourself. I mean, for instance, how many times do they write on your select channel, for instance? You could keep the metric of that as well. I mean, the more they do so, the more you're a priority for those companies. Okay, thank you so very much for your participation, for the information that you've shared, and for answering those questions. Hopefully, we'll catch up soon. Thank you so very much. Take good care of yourselves. Thank you for your attendance.